The first step to programming is choosing a language. For the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to be using the language processing. A compiler for a language converts our code into an actual program, and the compiler for processing can be attained from the website processing.org for free. Note that I've already begun to code, but thus far it's just been comments. Any new line beginning with 2 forward slashes will be ignored by the actual program, so we can use these to make comments for ourselves as we go. Any blank line will also be ignored, which we can use to make our code look much more readable. We can also make a multi-line comment with a single forward slash and an asterisk, which we can end with an asterisk and a forward slash. I'm personally not a fan of this multi-line comment style, and you will probably never see me use it outside of now. In fact, I'll just convert this here and now, since I think it's ugly, but that's just personal preference, so feel free to use them yourself if you wish. Most programming languages require at least a little setup before we can focus on our own code, but processing is ideal for beginners, because it is both very easy to create visual things and requires no setup to start with. In fact, we can run our program right now with just comments, but we'll just have an empty window, and a small window at that. For starters, let's mess with that window size. A default processing function called size can do the trick. We call a function by simply typing it out, placing an open and close parens, and a semicolon. Also note that functions are case sensitive, so be sure that size is lowercase. If we were to run this now, we still wouldn't have changed anything with our window size. Any variables a function requires must go inside the parentheses of the function in order, separated by commas. The size function takes in a width and a height value, so you can enter in 2 numbers separated by a comma and play around with the size here. If we don't like the default background color, we can change that with the background function, once again all lowercase. Background is an overloaded function, which means there are multiple background functions, each requiring different variables. In this case, if we pass in a single number from 0 to 255, this will be interpreted as changing the background to a grayscale value between black, 0, and white, 255. If we pass 3 numbers from 0 to 255, this will be interpreted as changing the amount of red, amount of green, and amount of blue of the color in that order. Also note that background can take in a whole number or a decimal value. Once you have messed around with the background color and made it the way you like, let's try drawing something else on the screen. The rect function will draw a rectangle, and it takes in 4 parameters. The first 2 are an x and a y coordinate, and the next 2 are a width and a height. If I make a rectangle that starts at 0, 0, where will it be when I run the program? In math class, we are taught to treat the point 0, 0 as the center of a graph, and the x value becomes more negative when we move to the left, and more positive if we move to the right. The y value in this case becomes more negative if we move down the graph, and more positive if we move up. With the programming languages I'm familiar with, processing included, the origin point 0, 0 is at the top left of the screen. The x value works as we would expect, where moving to the right becomes positive. The y value is flipped, however, and becomes more positive as we move down the screen. Generally, in processing, the starting point we define in the rect function will be the top left point of our rectangle. So in this case, the top left of our rectangle will be the top leftmost point of our program. The color of this shape is different than the background color we defined earlier. In fact, the rectangle has 2 different colors. We can set these with the fill and stroke functions with the same parameters we used for the background function earlier. Fill will change the inside color of the shape, and stroke will change the outside color. Notice the color of my rectangle didn't change here. Fill and stroke must be called before we draw our shape. This makes sense if we wish to draw multiple shapes, as we can call fill and stroke multiple times to create multiple shapes of different colors. For alternative color types, you can call the no stroke or no fill functions, which take no parameters, to turn off either. Calling stroke or fill again with a new color should turn it on again. That is all I'm going to cover for the processing basics, saving up programming logic for another time. If you want to experiment with drawing other shapes on your own, feel free to go to processing.org/reference for a list of functions and whatnot you can use with processing. For now, just focus on the Shapes category in the 2D Primitives subcategory. You can look at curves and attributes as well, if you're feeling adventurous, but attempting to draw something in 3D won't work by default without changing a few properties within our program first. Feel free to ask me any questions, which may help to direct my future tutorials. Otherwise, program terminated.